Dollemocracy. Facing down pessimistic politics with realistic optimism.
So Donald Trump was found liable for sexual abuse of E. Jean Carroll and defamation.
Yes.
And was ordered to pay $5 million in damages for that. And I want to talk a little bit about the case because I think it's important to talk about the jury. The jury was 6 men and 3 women. So this wasn't a jury of like radical feminists, you know. I mean, that's what Donald Trump would have you believe.
Of course, that's what he would have you believe.
There were 6 men on the jury. One of them, in fact, the E. Jean Carroll's team had attempted to remove from the jury because he was a Tim Pool fan. You know, the guy with the beanie and the headphones. He's a conservative commentator.
I wonder what's that guy covering under that beanie? You think it's a luxurious head of hair? Or is he another one who, when he flips on his TikTok, hearkening back to the intro topic, that he's just inundated with hair plug messages?
I mean,
I kind of feel bad for him in that way. I mean, it's easy to make fun of somebody, but he's clearly just a cripplingly insecure little douche, right?
So the jury,
rhetorical.
The jury member was a Tim Pool fan and it believes that his show is like nuanced and balanced or independent or something. It was like using words that clearly don't describe Tim Pool's show
Right.
or Tim Pool as a person. So
Did he describe Tim Pool as tall? Because if he did, he's clearly delusional, the juror.
So again, this was not a jury of people who are radical feminists, is the point.
Right.
And E. Jean Carroll did not make a statement on the day that this jury verdict was announced, but the following day she did start having press interactions, and she made an appearance on CNN where she talked about what this decision means to her.
I don't want to make this a political conversation, but the kind of dissonance between the moment yesterday on the front pages of all the newspapers,
all of them.
the getting your life back, something you've been thinking about and going through for decades, and then at the same time looking over and seeing that that man is also the front runner for the Republican nomination for president, and you listen to Republicans who were asked about this yesterday, and it is some version of what we heard for 6 years prior. Don't want to talk about it, dodge, say there's something corrupt about the process. Well, how do you kind of reconcile that moment, I guess?
Here's how I reckon it. Yesterday, the old view of what the perfect victim looks like totally changed.
What do you mean?
The old view of the perfect victim was a woman who always screamed, a woman who immediately reported, a woman whose life was supposed to fold up and she's never supposed to experience happiness again. That was just shut down with this verdict. The death of the perfect victim has happened. Now, this verdict is for all women. This is not really about me. It's for every single woman.
There in the courtroom was an encounter, an exchange between you and the president's lawyer, Joe Tacopina. Mm-hmm. He came up, you shook hands, I believe. What did he say?
Well, Joe Tacopina is very likable. He's sort of like an 18th century strutting peacock, and people like him. So when he sticks out his hand to first he congratulated Robbie, and then he was congratulating people on the team. And as I put my hand forward, I said, "He did it, and you know it." And then we shook hands, and I passed on.
Did he say anything in response?
No, he's a hail fellow well met. He went on shaking hands and smiling.
So I like E. Jean Carroll. I think that she is a very strong woman, and I think she did an amazing thing here. I also do not believe that it is the death of the perfect victim, that this verdict signals that it's the death of the perfect victim. I wish that were true. I desperately wish that were true, but I just don't think that that's the case. I think we're going to continue to see situations where attorneys, like Trump's attorney, that she described there as a person that everyone likes. I don't like him.
Not at all.
I don't find him to be likable.
I found out yesterday that he defended Joran Vandersloot, the guy who killed Natalie Holloway back in the early 2000s, her trip to Aruba, high school girl. Joe Tacopina fucking represented that monster. So he's just another slimy, deplorable defense attorney.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we're going to continue to see a similar line of questioning that he had for E. Jean Carroll during the trial, which focused a lot on why didn't she scream? And this is actually a pretty difficult moment for E. Jean Carroll during the trial, and was reported as kind of a conflict because she actually raised her voice during the questioning and said that this happened even though she didn't scream, and that she doesn't need to justify why she didn't scream. And he spent a lot of time on how she was actually behaving in the moment. And this is what she means by the perfect victim. The perfect victim is supposed to do, quote unquote, all the right things, report immediately go to the police so you can get a rape kit done. You're not supposed to have slept with anyone else. You should be a virgin. There's many things that go into this idea of the perfect victim, and screaming is one of them. You're supposed to fight back. You're supposed to have said no. You're supposed to scream. And even if you do all those things, you're still going to have your story interrogated, and you're still going to be disbelieved. I think we have made a lot of progress in that regard, and I think that this verdict signals progress as well, especially knowing that it was majority men on the jury, and that one of them loves Tim Pool and thinks he's a super reasonable, nuanced guy. And
with a full luxurious head of hair.
Yeah.
Atop his 6'3" frame.
One thing I did love about the aftermath of this verdict is how Fox News really tried to work through it in real time, because they have to report things that are happening, and they can't just skip over the fact that the current Republican frontrunner is found liable by a jury for sexual assault and defamation. That should be a headline, so they had to cover it, and they really struggled with covering it, though.
Specifically, how so?
Well, they are going to play a clip of the recorded deposition, because Donald Trump did not appear in court. He did not appear.
He was not even in the country for some of it.
Yeah, so they played a recorded deposition that he gave where he looks terrible. I mean, he comes off as only unlikable. He, at one point, references the attorney that is questioning him and talks about that, she's not his type either. I mean, he just comes across as a horrible person, as we all know. And specifically, Fox News is going to talk about the moment when he's showed a picture of him being with E. Jean Carroll, because he claims he doesn't know her. Right. So he showed a picture of him being with her, and he actually mistakes E. Jean Carroll for his former wife.
The former president said about he would never have been attracted to her. Watch this.
You say Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla, yeah. That's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to?
No.
Here.
Carroll.
Oh, is that?
The person you just pointed to was E. Jean Carroll.
Who is that? Who is this?
Point, your wife.
And the woman on the right is your then wife,
I don't
Ivana?
know. This was the picture. I assume that's John Johnson. Is that?
That's Carroll.
Because it's very blurry.
Your thoughts on that, Andy, as it might have been interpreted by this jury?
Well, I think the context for this, Martha, is that he said she wasn't his type. So, the last person you would want to confuse her with would be someone you married.
Yes.
I love Martha McCallum. They're just yes.
She's just a shill now.
Yeah.
I remember a time where it seemed that she played the role of actual straight journalist pretty well, but she's just in the tank now, just like a Brett Baer character.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me about this is that he claims, even on the CNN town hall last night, I don't know who this is. I don't know who this is. I don't know this woman. But then knows her husband at the time really well. Right. Names him, what his occupation is.
Says he's a great
pals.
Guy.
Yeah, great guy. So he knows the husband super well. Mm-hmm. What? Who's the? I'm so confused. What is this woman who looks just like my ex-wife? The woman that I had an affair on my first wife with and then married? This is just all too much for my little Trump brain.
Yeah, and the picture is not blurry, obviously. But you gotta love that moment when even Fox is struggling to make sense of it.
Yes.
But now we're gonna kind of transition to these different Republicans being asked to respond to this. And you'd think it would be easy, right? The Republican frontrunner for the presidential nomination, the former president, was just found liable of sexual assault and defamation. That seems like a pretty easy thing to denounce.
Especially for individuals who very well want to run for president against Donald Trump. But instead of treat him like an actual opponent, they cower in fear and ignore or divert or distract or just not address it at all.
And in some cases, do all of those things, but not do them well, as is the case with Mike Pence.
Well, I think that's a question for the American people, but I really can't comment on a judgment in a civil case. I have no knowledge of those matters.
I can't comment.
I'm sure the president will defend himself in that matter, and but it strikes me that it's just one more instance where at a time when American families are struggling, when our economy is hurting, when the world seems to become a more dangerous place almost every day, that it's just one more story focusing on my former running mate that I know is a great fascination to members of the national media, but I just don't think it's where the American people are focused.
You mean the world being a dangerous place on a daily basis, which includes men who rape women? Mike Pence, you fake earnest douche, you clown. There's so little credibility here that it's jarring for a guy with this, I'm a man who's lived nearly 70 years and I just can't come up with an opinion about a jury of his peers finding him liable for sexual assault. Let me ask Mother, my devoted Christian wife, what she feels about rapists. Just gross.
Get ready, because it is not much different when it comes to Mitch McConnell.
Do you accept as legitimate the verdict in New York finding that Donald Trump was liable for sexual abuse and defamation?
That's about presidential politics, and that'll all be settled in the primaries next year.
What about the verdict itself, the merits of the verdict?
It's all, I don't have any observations about it. The American people are going to have to decide, particularly Republicans and Democrats, who they want to run for president next year.
But are you going to stand by him? The American people are going to have to decide. Excuse me while I drain some of the gravy out of my neck. You can decide too. You're a voter too, Mitch McConnell. What the fuck are you going to do? Are you going to ignore rape? Are you going to ignore sexual assault? Of course you are. You're a Republican.
So on the same day that this news broke about the verdict against Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case, George Santos was charged. There was an indictment revealed, a 13-count indictment, which includes 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 2 counts of making materially false statements to the House of Representatives, and 1 count of theft of public funds. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. And
that sits well with me. It's like music to my little ears.
In another case of Republicans being unable to respond in any meaningful way whatsoever to the problems within the Republican Party, Kevin McCarthy was asked about both George Santos and Donald Trump.
No. Yes. Are you going to continue to stand by George Santos now that he's been indicted on federal charges? And will you stand by President Trump after a jury found him liable on sexual abuse?
I'm not going to avoid your question, but as you know, I've been at the White House. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen the indictment, but as you know, with George Santos, I did not put him on any committees. For those like Senator Menendez, who was indicted and went to trial, he was still able to vote, and others. I believe he's the chairman of a committee today. In America, we'll just follow the same pattern we always have, right? If a person is indicted, they're not on committees, they have the right to vote, but they have to go to trial. If just like we had a member of Fortenberry, he had the same ability. I removed him from committees, but he was found guilty, and I told him he needed to resign. That is my policies and principles on this, and I'd follow the same pattern.
And Trump being found liable?
I don't. I've been in meetings. I don't know.
Why not have this fight?
Just an absolute coward.
I love how he's like, I'm not going to avoid your question. He starts it by saying that.
And then avoids it.
Yeah, I mean, just say that you're going to avoid the question. I mean, you don't need to start with, I'm not going to avoid the question. Or that tells everyone what your plan is.
Or just don't call on Manu Raju. You know what the question's going to be, bro.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to ignore your question. Ignores question, ignores question, ignores question.
Yeah.
It's just so typical for Kevin McCarthy, who's, by the way, not good at this.
Well, let's also say that we're going to have a lot of negative things to say about CNN coming up very shortly. But before we do that, we want to say to Manu Raju, good job, Manu.
Good job, Manu.
We really appreciate Manu Raju's work. He
And that's
is
not,
fantastic.
That's not facetious.
No, he's great.
He does a good job.
Yes.
Fantastic, professional, dogged. He is what a journalist should be, not giving platforms to Donald Trump to lie for 70 minutes straight.